Welcome to another episode of Delay the Binge, the podcast about the pause before the behavior when life gets hard. I'm your host, Pam Dwyer, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and creator of the Delay the Binge framework, where we explore how one small pause can change the direction of a life. Today's guest believes that before we change our behaviors, we often have to change the stories that we've been living. My guest is Scott Mason, better known as the Myth Slayer. Scott is a two-time TEDx speaker, executive coach, attorney, author, fellow podcaster, and former senior government and nonprofit executive who helps people identify the hidden stories shaping their lives so they can begin writing new ones. Drawing from Greek mythology, leadership psychology, and his own extraordinary journey through personal collapse, reinvention, and even a near-death experience, Scott helps people move beyond fear into lives filled with greater purpose, courage, and freedom. Scott, welcome to Delay the Binge.
Pam, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited too. I can't wait just to dig deep.
It's going to be awesome.
It's always a little fun interviewing another podcaster because I know you spend a lot of your time asking the questions instead of answering them. Today, you get to be on the other side.
Be nice to me, Pam, please.
I'll be gentle, I promise. Before we started recording on my little questionnaire that I send out, you said you loved the style and vibe of the show. And I just wanted to say thank you for that because I don't hear that a lot. And it really helps me. It kind of feeds the need,
Life is not always as long as we might want it to be. And even if it's long, it's still short. It is too short to ever spare anyone a compliment, especially if it's real. So I'm going to keep it real. And I'm glad that realness landed with you.
Oh my gosh, it did. It did. It made me a lot more comfortable interviewing someone as wonderful as you. What's bringing you joy these days? I like to go there first. Like, what are you doing now?
I am actually living life in the lane that I was meant to live. For me, as irritating as the day-to-day inconveniences of living in New York City, of dealing with technology, of just being a human being in the world, as frustrating and challenging as those might be, at the end of the day, I have clarity about my mission. I wake up every day in one way or another, moving it forward, having that clarity, knowing that I'm in that lane, feeling it happen. That brings your homie joy.
Well, you exude joy, so it's obvious. From my homework, I know that you've been an attorney, an executive, a coach, a speaker, an author, and now, okay, forgive me for doing this, but I really have to do it. The Myth Slayer.
Wow, that was cool. I want to record that. I'm just going to take that snippet out of here and just use it everywhere. So once this is out in the world, Pam, it's too late. It's mine.
It so deserves that. You can't just say the Myth Slayer. It needs like a big, huge echo. Like in the wrestling ring or something.
Yeah, like maybe a James Earl Jones sort of voiceover. Thank you.
Yes, I so love it. So which version of Scott would be the most surprised by where your life has taken you?
What a great question. Growing up, I grew up, for the audience members who are going to spend their time just randomly researching me for no reason at all, in the backwoods of Kansas. And my mom worked for a dog food factory. My dad worked for the highway patrol. And it was a very blue-collar rural milieu. Expectations weren't high for me or really for anyone that I grew up with. But I always felt that there was more in me that I wanted to do and was capable of. Like you, by the way, Pam, I was a writer from the time I was a child. And so I would write things, and I had all these fantasies about being out there and getting published, but I knew I couldn't do it in Nowheresville, Kansas. With all due respect to Nowheresville, Kansas, I just couldn't do it there. And so I came to New York, and I quickly realized that in order to be successful in the avenues that I saw and in the avenues that mattered to me at the time, which all pertain to things like social acceptance and prestige and the eyes of other people and the opinions of other people, I needed to engage with the world professionally in a certain way. And so I was, someone who was like, I have to wear a suit. You need to wear a suit. You have to wear a tie. My idea of variety and individuality was having suspenders as opposed to a regular belt and all this sort of stuff. And I presented and I spoke and I thought all of this sort of, all these sort of related things in a highly linear way that can best be described as conformist. Now, I would have described it as professional, but really it was just conformist. What would surprise me most now about the life I live today is that I actually don't give a darn what anyone thinks. I do my own thing. I present my own way. I speak the way I want to speak. I talk to people the way I want to talk to and who I want to talk to. And that is something that I had to evolve into. Yeah. That I might not have ever imagined was possible. I might have looked at myself 10 years ago today and said, what a freak. But you know what? Living this way is better. It's awesome.
Well, all I know is I want some of what you got over there. That energy is just exudes charisma. I mean, it's just awesome because you're happy. You're truly happy. And it will show, people. I'm just telling y'all, it will show if you find who you really are. The person you were meant to be. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Yeehaw. You are in New York. Yep. So if I had one afternoon there, where are we going?
I would take you immediately. Well, I'm going to give you two options. I might take you to the High Line, which is a raised railroad track above the actual streets of New York City that was abandoned a long time ago and turned into a park full of all sorts of plant wonders and architectural wonders and views of the river and really cool sorts of designs and public sculptures and all that sort of stuff everywhere you can walk. It's amazing. And not only that, but it goes right through the building where the Food Network is. So if you like to eat, hey. Right. So I might take you there. On the other hand, if you're in a super active mood, I am a mega bicyclist. And so I might take you on a all-day bicycle, probably 15-mile bicycle tour of Manhattan. We'd start in Central Park. We'd go up to Harlem. We'd see the biggest cathedral in North America, Columbia University. Then we'd go to the Riverside and ride that bike all the way down to the bottom of Manhattan. Then maybe park the bike, get on the ferry, go by the Statue of Liberty. If there's time, maybe even cross the Brooklyn Bridge, then bicycle through Manhattan back to Central Park. And yes.
That would be incredible. My daughter just moved. She's 30, but she just moved to New Jersey. She got a job at Princeton working with international students. Wow. And she knows no one. And she did go to New York one day already, I think, because this was about 3 months ago. We moved her over there. Maybe I'll send her your way.
Hook us up, Pam. I'm down for that. I love it.
She's the most beautiful creature in the world, inside and out.
That helps. I was going to say, don't send her my way if she's a jerk, but I can't imagine that your daughter would be a jerk. So
no,
let's make some assumptions here that are fair.
She tried a time or two with me, but she didn't. All right. So, as I prepared for today, one thing kept coming back to me. I don't actually think you teach mythology. I think you teach identity. Would that be fair to say?
What an unbelievably astute observation. Absolutely. I am not a professional mythology scholar. And that's really important because, there are enough people that are experts at that. They don't need me added to the mix. Right? B, I view mythology as a lens for an outcome. They are not the outcome themselves. And so to the extent that they are intimately tied to identity, their pathways to solve problems, reflections of thought patterns as well as spiritual portals. That all is true. But really, at the end of the day, I'm seeking to take people into a mindset that enables them to step into an identity, not for them to leave the most erudite people about Greek myths in the world.
Wow. Well, and people need visuals. I'm sorry, but I mean, everyone I've ever met, if you give them a visual or something to compare themselves to, they're like, oh, I get it. But your work centers around 5 toxic myths.
Yes.
And before we go any deeper about anything else, could you just give us a brief overview of each one?
Yes. And again, to explain or explain these toxic myths to people who may not have any other background in them, these toxic myths are each patterns of thinking that have allegories and genres of Greek myths that ultimately represent behavior patterns or ways of being that keep you stuck or even in a self-destructive loop. The 5 toxic myths are as follows. Number 1, the tragic origin myth. The tragic origin myth is a story you tell yourself in which the outcomes of your life, whether personal or professional, are guided by the circumstances of your early life or even your birth. Number 2, the social myth. You're living out the social myth when you are making decisions based on the real or perceived social expectations of others. I mentioned that I used to do that a little bit earlier in this conversation. Number 3, the ritual myth. The ritual myth is experienced when you engage in the same thought patterns or make the same types of decisions over and over and over again, ritualistically, even though they no longer serve you. Just as the ancients used to make animal sacrifices for rain, even though after a while it became pretty obvious that killing a lamb didn't necessarily bring a thunderstorm. Right? They still just did it. The 4th one is the doomsday myth. The doomsday myth exists when you hesitate or refuse to make challenging or risky decisions or shift in your mindset in a way that can lead to making challenging or difficult decisions because you are concerned that taking that action will somehow lead to a mythical apocalypse. Ignoring, by the way, the fact that the gathering clouds that are emerging because you're not making that difficult decision are often worse than the apocalypse that you're running around afraid of. The 5th and final toxic myth is the underworld myth. Now, Pam, in ancient Greek myths, if you died, with some exceptions that may come up later in this conversation, but for the purposes of this right now, it is irrelevant. You usually went to a place called Hades, specifically the fields of Asphodel, which was an endless, gray, featureless, boring plane that just went on forever and ever and ever. And you as a spirit gradually lost your consciousness and your sense of identity and your memory, turning into nothing. And so the entire eternity that you faced was one that was full of hopelessness and despair. Those who live out the underworld myth are trapped in what they perceive as an eternity of mental, spiritual, or emotional hopelessness. And it's identified easily by people that are very cynical or apathetic. So those are the 5 toxic myths, and understanding them, naming them, and then doing something about them can have a profound impact on your life.
Gosh, I love that so much. As you were describing those, I wonder if people listening are already recognizing themselves in them. And I think you mentioned it, but which myth do you see most often, and which myth are you?
I have to say, I don't see one or the other more often. Some days I might see the ritual myth more often. Other times I might see the doomsday myth. Like in corporate leadership, I see the doomsday myth a lot. I will say there, I'm afraid to do XYZ. I'm afraid to pivot my business, or I'm afraid to get rid of this employee who's high performing but pure evil, right? Because I'm afraid of the consequences. So I think that in corporate America, particularly in the professions where people are trained to be very risk averse and they're always consequentialist in their thinking, the doomsday myth myth, right, just blows up like crazy. But in independent business people and creatives and mission-oriented professionals, or just people that are seeking to make changes in their lives, all 5 of them show up in more or less equal percentages. Now, in terms of me, Pam,
what did you overcome?
I overcame all of them. That's why I'm an
creative.
expert. Yes, I'm not talking about these things as though I am some Greek god speaking from up high. Your homie has lived them all.
Oh my
all.
gosh. Well, another thing that struck me while learning about your work is that on this podcast, we talk about the pause before the behavior when life gets really tough.
Yeah.
Whether it's emotional eating, people pleasing, anger, overworking, shutting down, there's almost always a story running beneath the behavior.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where the myth lives?
Wow. I would say that's a very strong and powerful way to think about it. Yeah. It can be a place that is right on the surface and is sitting directly at the top of the consciousness, but usually it's not. And what I'm hearing when you say that it is that it is in this deeper space. Myths have their power and have been the subject of massive levels of study by minds as diverse as Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung, because of that and that depth of that space that they operate in is exactly what I'm hearing you talk about.
Yeah. That's the first thing I thought about, because I always try to reflect on anybody's message and see how I can apply it to my message and see how I can get people to understand it better.
Yeah.
You also talk about naming the myth. I found myself wondering, does naming it actually create the pause?
What a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
It does. Right? Because if you are going to name something, you have to take a moment, right? Think about it, process it, make sure that what you're saying, what you're naming has anything to do with anything, and then naming it. And then once you put something out in the world, as I'm sure you know, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Pam, by the way. But once you put something out in the world, there's inherently a pause as it is either processed by you or processed by those that you engage with when you utter those words. And so there's inherently, due to either the timed nature of thought or the time between when we utter something and when others react to it, that again, something can shift inside. And so hearing that, it seems like that pause is an integral part of this whole process, like it or not. Is that sort of how you're thinking about it too, though?
Yeah, I think of the pause, I think of it in terms of the brain, right? Because we react with unhealthy patterns or unhealthy behaviors. It could be, it's not just food. It could be anything. And we know it doesn't serve us. We know we shouldn't do it, but every day we do it. And so I started asking why.
Yeah.
And it's because there's a deeper thing going on beneath the surface. And that's why we go into autopilot, auto mode. And the only way to break that pattern that's in your brain, and it's scientifically proven that if you pause long enough, in that moment between the pause and the reaction, you can actually take control and control the outcome. Ask yourself questions like, why am I about to eat this entire chocolate cake? I know I'm going to feel like crap tomorrow, but I do it anyway. Why?
It's so fascinating. I think about my many years in large organizational life, particularly actually in both of the principal spheres in which I operated, law and executive leadership. In both of those situations, rapid, almost instinctive, and almost inherently, because of the nature of it, non-thoughtful, instant response was highly valued. To some extent, if you're able to be a fast thinker and say that, you gave the impression that you were intelligent, and that was highly valued. And sometimes because business or legal work, particularly if you're in litigation, can move very, very fast. The ability to think quickly and be able to say something off the top of your head that at least makes sense and has some plausibility really does lead to a financial, professional, and outcome related premium. But what you're hitting at was particularly in non-litigation settings. In litigation, I understand why that just may be the way it is. But for instance, in corporate or leadership decision making, this obsession with whoever talks fastest is the smartest often led to, exactly, you're shaking your head because you know what I'm going to say. It led to action that was quick. It led to decisiveness often, but things that aren't thought out are often like bridges that are built without paying attention to the plans, right? They can just collapse. And one of the things I really tried to do with my own staff and try and do with myself, although I'm not always as successful as I would like, being perfectly honest, is to take that pause and actually bother to think. Someone recently told me, Scott, you spend too much time thinking. Well, the world might be better if we spend a little bit more time pausing and actually thinking before we just did whatever reaction came into our little minds.
Oh my gosh. That is correct, because when you pause in any educational environment, when you've had a teacher, every time if the class was loud and not listening and she couldn't get the attention, she would start speaking slow and quiet and everybody would stop to try to hear her. But that is what allowed us to stop long enough to absorb whatever it is or retain whatever she was trying to get out to us. But if she yelled and talked really fast, shut up, everybody, they're not going to listen. But you listen when people slow down and talk with intention and clarity and soft. That's when people really pay attention.
I love that. One of the areas within the Mythslayer framework that I have, that I speak about and comes up a lot, is charisma. It's my contention that charisma is a foundational leadership skill that people ignore at their own risk. And you see it played out publicly in politics, by the way, all the time.
Yeah.
People can develop real followings and begin to exert real power, even if their ideas aren't as good, or sometimes even if their ideas are actively bad, because they have charisma, as opposed to someone who might be sitting up there and talking in a way that is boring or might be shrieking all the time. And one of the things that it comes up a lot of times when I speak on that topic, is the individual who says, well, I'm a 70-year-old female who's 5'3" and I weigh 140 pounds. How can I be charismatic? Or I'm an introvert and words don't come out of my mouth as quickly, and I don't have the sort of bombastic voice, for instance, that you do, Scott Mason. So how can I be charismatic? And I tell them, charisma is the ability to be able to command attention in order to set forth a message that leads to positive action. And sometimes the person that is up there stomping around, people just get tired of it after a while. They tune it all out. Being soft, using pauses, leveraging who and what you are, which particularly if you're an introvert or a shy person, is someone who lends to that sort of behavior, actually can have more charismatic impact than anything. And then again, it allows people, as you're saying, I hadn't thought about this before, so I appreciate you sort of tying this into a ribbon. It allows people to have that pause so they can actually take in what you're saying, think about it, and perhaps disrupt whatever thought patterns or whatever narratives are running inside their own minds to be able to move closer to where you want them to go.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but even in speaking, they teach you that, and if you tend to use words like, or which I tend to use all of them, but they say the trick to not doing that is to pause. Instead of saying anything, you just pause.
The weird thing too is someone once told me that the pause that you think is really long actually no one else thinks is long at all. And there have been times in which I've stood up there on a stage and just been silent, counted to a beat of 3 and then maybe gone over a little bit and then gone on and later asked people for feedback. And particularly about that pause, oh, I thought that was part of the show. Right.
How do they know if it's intentional or not?
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, I have to share this with you. I don't think I've ever shared any of this with anyone, but it was when my husband and I have been married 30 years. Oh, no, 32.
Congratulations.
Well, it's my second one. I'm not going to look for a third time. Third time's the charm. But I don't know. But I remember when we were just dating, and that's when I was not healed, still pretty broken. And we were on a road trip. And I can't stand the empty, quiet space. He's very quiet. He's an introvert. He's very reserved. And so I was trying to fill the space with all of this discussion, all this talking, blah, 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 blah. So finally he looks over at me and he goes, Pam, it's okay to be quiet.
How did that feel to hear?
Oh, that did not go over well with me at the time. But now I look back and I'm like, it was so profound because it is okay to be quiet.
Yeah. Sometimes people need it. When I'm working with clients, a lot of times we will have a discussion in which a profound question is asked or a profound point has been discovered through our work together. And, initially, I didn't want to allow a period of silence because the client was paying for our time together. And I didn't want them to feel as though their time was being wasted on dead air. But really, you're right. There have been times in which I've just sat there with a client, maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe even a little bit longer, as we've taken it in. They need that time to process too. And I need some time to process and observe how they're taking it rather than just glossing over and moving to the next thing. And then the other thing too is once you're aware of that, I don't know about you, Pam, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but once I was aware of the fact that filling the space all the time can be irritating to people or overwhelming, then I started to also notice there's people that will not shut up. And that's irritating, right? And I don't want to be at risk of being that sort of person either.
Yeah. No, I've interviewed a guest before. She specializes in teaching listening as a skill.
Ooh.
Oh my gosh. She wrote a book and I've read it twice now.
Wow.
What's it cost you to not listen? It's by Christine Miles.
Wow.
And she talks about that we are taught to pay attention, but no one is taught, even in childhood, we're not taught to actually listen, meaning tell me more. If I'm listening to you, instead of trying to interject or tell you what I'm thinking, I should just say, really, Scott? Well, tell me more. And that's the question of a true listener. And it makes the other person feel listened to. They feel heard. I just love it because I started podcasting so I could practice listening. Because my therapist told me, you interrupt, Pam, because you think you know what everybody's going to say. Well, maybe.
Wow.
But I do like listening. I learn a lot more.
Well, and I've got to say also, podcasting has helped with that. And it has forced me to be in a mindset of question asking. Obviously, as an attorney, I was used to asking questions in order to extract information from witnesses. However, again, the legal profession can, for a number of reasons, cultivate a lot of narcissism and intellectual arrogance. And as you climb up the executive ladder in organizations of any consequence, the same perverse outcomes can sometimes happen. And so then that listening or that question asking can serve personal reasons, right? Like I want an answer to this because I'm mad and I want to get to the bottom of what caused this problem, or because of whatever other business or personal agenda happened to be on top of mind that day. But what you're talking about is listening for its own sake. And I will say that podcasting has gotten me interested in that, because no one wants to listen to a podcaster who's talking the whole time, just has a guest sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They want
it's
it to be
about you.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Podcast is not where you go and be Diana Ross for a day. Come on.
So true. And in sales, silence was taught. I've done
Mm.
sales my whole life, but they taught me in negotiations. You say what the price is, and the first one to speak after that loses. So you say it's $5.99, and you just sit there and wait and see what they're going to say. But if you say something else, you've lost the deal.
We're acculturated in the West, especially my suspicion is because of the influence of social media and television before that, and radio even, where, again, dead space was something that you didn't have, and quick, rapid banter and all this sort of stuff and repartee and all that, and fast-moving plots and all that sort of thing had an impact on how we view conversation and human interaction. To see that sort of silence as uncomfortable and thinking about it myself, I'm sitting here listening and thinking, well, in a negotiation, how long would I be able to sit there simply before the pressure of, which is again a totally imagined pressure, no one's putting it on anybody, to actually say something would move into place, and that's hard.
Yes, it's so hard. Well, you mentioned also that there's two stories that especially felt right for this audience. One was your struggle with bigorexia, which I'll be honest, never heard of it before. I had to look it up. And the other was your near-death experience. I'm curious, which story feels like the right place for us to begin today?
I'm thinking perhaps the near-death experience.
Oh, I see.
Because it's about silence, listening, hearing, and being forced to take time to respond and think. Everything that you stand for. Pause. Profound pause.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear it.
So I'm going to share some things with you, Pam, as well as your audience, that are surreal.
Okay.
That are dark. I'm also going to periodically pause myself because I don't want to overtalk. I don't want to overwhelm. I don't want to be that person who everyone's saying, when will he shut up?
Never. It's too interesting.
That's good to hear. But don't hesitate to interrupt me. And I promise to you and those who are watching or listening to this episode that there is a resolution that is light. And I hope beautiful and meaningful and something that you can take into your own life and use after I share the things that I'm about to share.
Okay.
Thank you.
I love a story.
I bet you do. I bet you're a doggone good storyteller too.
Oh, yes. First and foremost.
About 3 years ago, middle of June, I woke up around 3 a.m. unexpectedly, feeling as though an ice pick made of metal was stabbing at the base of my skull.
Oh my gosh.
It was intensely painful. I remember crying out, and it wouldn't go away. Now, there was no ice pick touching the base of my skull. There was nothing touching me at all. But over the next few days, that began a series of escalating symptoms that went from bad to worse. I started getting headaches. I started losing the ability to focus. I remember I was supposed to be at an all-day retreat, and I couldn't go because I wasn't feeling well enough. And I wanted to watch a 3-minute Donna Summer video on YouTube. I couldn't even get through the intro bars. It took too much focus. I lost control of my body temperature. And so it would be boiling hot in the apartment that I live in, and I would be shivering, and my husband was coming and piling on blankets and bathrobes and towels and everything to warm me up, and nothing worked. And then a few hours later, I would be boiling hot, and we'd put fans on me, and nothing could control that either. I was chattering uncontrollably. My joints began to hurt. I began to feel aches over every single part of my body. And then I started to drop weight. I dropped 20 pounds in 10 days. And then I stopped eating, and I stopped drinking, and I started to sleep And when I say sleep, I mean really sleep. Like one day I slept 16 hours. The next day I slept 20. And when I woke up from that 20-hour sleep, I woke up with a start because I experienced something that haunts me to this day. It's actually one of the most profound things that ever has happened in my life, and goes as to the importance of pausing and thinking about what we experience rather than just reacting. I had what I call the dream. Now, Pam, I know the difference between dreams and reality. And dreams, when I have them at least, right? They kind of don't make sense. They're random. I remember them for a few minutes after I wake up, and then they just sort of flitter away into nothing. But I never think that, oh, I just experienced reality. This dream was not like that at all. To this day, I remember the dream as clearly and as realistically as I do our conversation 5 minutes ago. And there are times when I remember the dream and it's all I can do not to break down. I don't think that's going to happen today. But as I experience what that living experience of a dream was like, and in this dream, I was in a mansion. It was a beautiful mansion, old, in a New York City brownstone that was attached to a bunch of other mansions. And there was like Turkish rugs on the floor and pianos and chandeliers and spiral staircases. And the rooms in the mansion were connected to each other through a large, arch. They didn't have doors that you could just walk through. And then you would walk from one room to the other and then from one mansion to the other. And they were each lavishly appointed, one more so than the next. Marble fireplaces with paintings of the patriarchs above them. And all of them in every room had a floor-to-ceiling bookcase. And that bookcase was full of all things, in every single case, baseball cards, not books. Weird. And I was going from room to room pulling out baseball cards. And every baseball card I pulled out in every room in every mansion was identical. It had at the bottom big bold letters saying, "Your number's up." And above that, my headshot. I woke up unable to walk or even to stand. I was rushed to the hospital, in and out of consciousness, and in incredible agony. My husband, when they finally got me a hospital room later that night and hooked me up to all these machines, took a photo of me, and there I was, right, like rail thin, or asleep, all looking a crazy mess. And I later asked him, "Why on earth did you take that picture of me?" And he said, "I didn't know if they allowed photos in the morgue." Yes. I remember the next day, I think. A lot of those early days are a blur because I just wasn't with it and I was in and out of consciousness. A doctor coming to my bedside and saying, "Scott, we're going to pull you through this." And I told her, "I actually don't think so. I think I'm going to die." And I remember sitting there planning, who do I need to let know so that the word gets out? And she said, I don't think that's going to happen, Scott. And I said, I told her about the dream I just had. I told her, I think my number is up. I think this is it. And I'll never forget. She just stared at me. She just looked. "Pam, my number was up. The dream was right. The dream was so disturbing, so frightening, and so ominous that it forced me to pause and to think. Was the life that I had lived the one that it needed to be? Was it everything that I could make it? Had I wasted it? How had I treated people? How had I treated myself? Had I treated myself with love? Had I treated others with love? What had I been here for? And by the way, in treating myself with or without love, had I been treating my partner with love? Because he was as invested in my life as anyone. And on and on and on. I later came to understand that the words, "your number's up," may have meant something else too. But I had to pause and think about everything that happened next before I truly was in a place where I could begin to process that. But something else really dramatic had to happen first. And that taught me about the importance of listening, thinking, and pausing in a way that I could never have imagined before it occurred. I was being tested left and right for everything under the sun. You name the disease, the syndrome, no matter how obscure it was, they tested me for it. Endless blood tests, endless saliva tests, endless scans, endless this, that, and the other. And nothing was showing up. Nothing at all. As a matter of fact, there was, in some scans, situations in which they would see something like a shadow in areas where I was describing the most intense pain. But then when they would go close and look at that area, there'd be nothing there at all. It was like the whole shadow itself had just vanished. I was in a double hospital room. There was a thin curtain between me and the bed next door. The man that was originally there with me left, and he was replaced by a man who was very, very elderly. I believe he was in his late 80s. And because I could hear the conversations that they were having, and they could hear the conversations I was having between through that curtain, I was also aware that although this man was still ambulatory, whatever he had was going to make this his last hospital visit ever, and he was going to the hospice immediately afterwards. Now, that hospital was the floor was very noisy. There was a lot going on. And that led to an increased sense of chaos in my whole situation. There was chaos because I didn't know what was going on. There was chaos because I was in intense pain. There was chaos because there were new versions of this pain coming on all the time. And this lack of temperature control was still happening. So randomly at night, I'd suddenly start to shiver. My digestive system had essentially stopped working. All of this sort of stuff was going on. I was in pain, and I was in ever deepening despair. And when that man came in, every night, a group of other men would come to our room and surround his bed, and they would start to sing. This man was an Orthodox Jewish man. He was part of, I found out, the Hasidic community, which has been just such an integral part of New York City's life since the mid-20th century, at least after World War II. I honestly can't even imagine New York City without the Hasidic Jewish community here. And the men that would come and surround his bed and sing were also Hasidic. I assumed at the time that they were his nephews or his sons, that he was some family patriarch. I later found out that in the Hasidic community, if word gets around that an elder is sick or dying, random men will just come to where it is and they will engage in this singing. And this singing, if there were words, I had no idea what language it was, and it didn't really sound like words. It sounded like mumbling. Sometimes if there was noise outside of the room, somewhere else on that floor, and this was all at night, they would just sing louder and cover it up. And there was something about these songs that they would sing night after night that deeply impacted me.
Oh, gosh.
It was, Pam, as though a giant transparent bubble, an orb, was being created through the sound of their singing. There's this lyricless, a completely alien language, if it was even that I was hearing. And that orb was somehow filling the room, escaping past that curtain, covering me.
Mm.
As I'd lay there night after night, like a child, dying child in his mother's bosom, the orb of the singing would come inside. And it was as though I'd left my body. I stopped feeling the pain of the shell that I'm in. I stopped feeling the fear. I lost the despair. And in that other place, I knew only two things: peace and love. The most profound love that a human being can feel. Then they'd stop and leave, and I'd be back in my body. But the next day, or in the days afterwards, I would tell my husband, or there was people that would visit me, and I would tell them about this. And I couldn't help it. I'd burst into tears, remembering the beauty of these songs, but also this other place that they took me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, why was I being given the gift of these songs? I'm a Gentile. They weren't meant for me. They were things that were quite obviously sacred. And I wasn't part of that sacred community. But nonetheless, providence, God, the universe, spiritual force, whatever you might call it, deigned to have me next to it, listening, and silently pausing, thinking. I'm a speaker. Like you, I'm a writer. I have a voice.
Yeah.
And I know how to make it heard. Why was I being given this? I had to stop and think. I also had to think about the internal story I was telling myself, the myths,
Mm-hmm.
and think about how were they impacting what was going to happen to me. If I believed the message of those baseball cards was that I was going to die, I was going to die. If I wanted to live, I needed to understand those words very differently. Eventually, it was the time of that old man to move on to his journey's next phase. Like I said, he was still ambulatory. And so before he left, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, he stood up and he peeked his head around the curtain and looked me right in the eye. And I looked back. He smiled and he nodded his head. And then he went on his way. Now, I'll never know who that man was. But he changed my life. And I even say he saved my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
All because I had to pause.
That's, I can't even say anything. That's so beautiful. That is not dark.
Thank you.
That is thank you for sharing that. That's such a powerful experience.
Yeah.
And for being vulnerable enough to.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving the space.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes. You said the songs of the strangers, that it awakened something in you.
Yes.
How did that experience change not only what you believe, but who you believe yourself to be?
Mm.
That's the message. It's almost like you did, like you said, you did die. That version of
Yeah.
you. And it's like you were reborn.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm sure it changed the way you lead, the way you love, and the way you live.
Yes. It's interesting. A friend of mine once introduced me to a friend of hers who claimed to have intuitive powers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I believe that or not. However, I do know that that woman told me, Scott, my sense is that something happened to you. You were given a second chance at life, and you intend to make the absolute most of it. Now, whether she had intuitive powers or not, I don't know. But I told her, you got that one right. I don't know that anyone can ever go through this sort of thing and leave unchanged. Because what I later found out about these songs was that they are believed by the Hasidic people. They weren't singing in Hebrew, wasn't in any language. They believe that these songs are divinely channeled, which is why strangers can get together, sing these songs, and sing them in unison, which they were being sung, even though they are of no human language. It's believed that they're literally the language of the Creator itself, and that these songs, when they're channeled, are designed to bypass the intellect, to bypass the heart, and to go directly into the soul, which is why I felt my consciousness circumvent or leave my body and experience something that can only be described as transcendental.
Yes.
After that, I can never, ever ignore or leave that behind as part of what I do at all. I had very much been someone that understood, for instance, my framework, Greek myths, as a fascinating and useful allegory for transformation, but I had not truly explored or even thought about or been prepared to really feel, well, what are they really about? What was really going on when people worshipped these or engaged in these practices for thousands of years?
Yeah.
Even though, by the way, many of them knew full well that the Olympian gods weren't up on Mount Olympus because they scaled it and saw that nothing was there. But still, these myths persisted, and it's not just the Greeks, other societies as well. What was really going on with them? Why was I given that gift? Why was I allowed to connect? Well, it became very apparent in terms of how I deal with people and how I think about people and where I move, that's connection to the beyond, the ineffable, the unknowable within each of us is really at the heart of my message, what I'm here to do. And as a matter of fact, when I interview with individual coaching clients in particular, I inevitably find a way to bring that up, because if they're just purely operating on the surface, we're not right for each other. Pam, I'll share one other thing with you and your audience about this. To this day, no one knows what this illness was. I recently came down, as I mentioned to you in the pre-show, with the Coxsackie virus, which is essentially hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Yeah.
And I went to the emergency room because I didn't know what it was at first, and it was intensely painful. And the emergency room doctor, what happened is there were like blisters that came all over the palms of my hands as well as the soles of my feet. And so the emergency room doctor took photos of this, and then he sent it to the infectious diseases department of that hospital. And the infectious disease doctor got back to him and suggested that that was probably what it was. But one of the things the ER doctor told me was that the infectious disease doctor remembered me immediately. He said, the infectious doctor remembered you had come into that hospital. You were so sick. It wasn't clear you were going to live. And they tested you up and down and left and right and everywhere. And no one could figure out what this was. And he remembers this. It was 3 years ago. He said, the doctor remembers this to this day. This lack of knowledge about what it was.
Yeah.
And why I got better. And I am 100% healthy. There was a lengthy recovery, yes, but I'm 100% fine, as if it never happened. Goes as to your question as well. How does this engage? What does this mean? Well, if this had been something with a clear diagnosis, I would have said, okay, these are, especially the sort of empirical, scientifically driven, data driven person that I was before, said, okay, this is the data that I have. These are the things I need to do to address it or to avoid this in the future. Instead, what I had was a surreal dream that was unlike anything I'd had in my life that sent me a very clear message. I had a bizarre experience with the fundamental nature of my consciousness and songs that apparently were coming from somewhere above and beyond. And then a mystery about the whole cause of the thing that was unresolvable. Well, what do I do with that? The lack of a clear, narrow solution also forced me to listen and to pause. The recovery time really forced me to pause because I wasn't able to do anything when I got back home. I could barely walk across my studio apartment. What a privilege, because I had to look at everything. Everything. Not just the physical, but the spiritual, but the heart, but the inside, but the way that I deal with people. Like I said, my number was up, but it was a different sort of number. A new call was the number that was being pulled. And I got to live it.
You were anointed. You realize that?
I don't know if I was anointed, but I was given the chance to see so much that I needed to change.
And rebirth, being born again, is painful. You're a light bringer.
Am
you bring
I?
light. Yes. That's what I noticed right away. The energy, the charisma I was talking about, that's light. You're a light bringer.
Well, I hope that I'm able to bring light to a lot of people because we need it.
Yes, we do. More than ever. People love to hate right now. It's very sad.
It is. And what does it bring upon those who hate? What does it bring upon us as a culture? Exhaustion. And work. And by the way, again, going to what you talk about, hate is reactive. Hate is instantaneous, right? It's not, you don't sit around, listen to others, and then pause and contemplate and then say, this is why I want to hate. Maybe you do, so you've got other problems.
Most people hate because they fear being hated. That's so deep. It's the psyche of everything, but what an amazing, incredible. I hope is that written anywhere? You should write about it.
Yes, I have a whole chapbook about it. Thank you.
Forever, because that's profound and it makes people think, what am I doing with my life? You know? Which is why you probably came up with your simple but powerful idea of naming the myth, choosing a hero story, and taking one concrete action.
Oh my God, you're my best friend. You remember all that?
Well, because I watched a lot of those podcasts.
You're like, I'm saying this in my sleep. Will you shut up about Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So why is naming the myth so important?
Yeah. Naming the myth. First of all, as you said, and we discussed earlier, it forces you to pause. Yeah. But secondly, once you name something, you give it an identity. You confront it. You can't run away from it anymore. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist. And once you acknowledge that something exists and you lose the ability to run from it, then your decisions have to change and you have to act differently. It's not just a matter of what you want to do, because by naming it, you've given it life in the universe. It's there, like it or not. So that really, although it can be painful and difficult, and the shift, as I'm sure you know, into a different way of being can be very overwhelming and make you feel like you don't know where you're going to go next. shifting actions, shifting behaviors, making different decisions on a day-to-day basis is exactly how people are able to move beyond the things that are keeping them physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually stuck, and stepping into that transcendence, stepping into that and connecting with that, what I call the inner Olympian, that inner
That's the
God,
hero story.
the hero story.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, in Joseph Campbell's framework that created this whole concept of what we call the hero. I'm not a Campbellian, but I will say he's right about the idea that the hero story only has meaning if upon the hero's conquest, he actually brings it back to the world with some sort of meaningful action. Right? For me, the action is based on meaningful actions that you take with regards to yourself. But at the end of the day, all of this work is for naught if it's self-indulgent and narcissistic, in my opinion, if you're not actually somehow shifting the world around you because of it.
Yes, using it. That's my whole mantra is using pain for purpose. Using it.
Yeah.
Like energy, like fuel. Can
Yeah.
someone simply decide to live a hero story, or is that something we practice one choice at a time?
Yeah. You can decide, but you're right, embedded in what you're saying. Decisions don't mean a lot if actions aren't practiced day after day. And you can even take a big dramatic action. Yeah, I always tell people, and I'm sure you do too, when you start making changes, go small. Right? Don't say, I'm going to shift my entire... Look, some people get these ideas, I'm going to do blah, 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 and then they quit their job without any real plan or with any whatever. Don't do that. How about you start just by maybe meeting some people that are in that job or doing some research about what that job is really like or what that path is really like, and then gradually building yourself up to it. And so you are a hero action by action. You know, Pam, there's a great story about the Trojan War hero Achilles. He originally did not want to fight in the Trojan War, and he and his mother arranged for him to basically dress up as a princess and pretend to be a princess for on a remote island somewhere, because women didn't fight in wars at the time. And by living that false life, he was able to avoid being in the war. Now, eventually, another Trojan War hero named Odysseus, who had been told that the hero who was hidden was necessary for the Greeks to win the Trojan War, went and on this huge search for this hero and came across this quote unquote princess who he immediately suspected was not living very authentically. And so Odysseus brought a basket full of gifts to all of the king's princesses and observed their reactions. Now, most of the princesses went for the ball gowns and the tiaras and the heels and all that sort of stuff. But one of them went for some swords and some shields and some helmets that had been hidden with these more princess-like things. And the minute this princess picked up the sword and the shield, suddenly the princess was 1.5 feet taller. His skin was crackling. The earth was shaking. The gowns fell off. Light came from his eyes. He had decided to be a hero. But he still had to hold on to that armor and those weapons. He still had to walk to Odysseus's ship. He still had to sail across the ocean. He still had to get off that ship and go to the troops and begin to fight in the war. And he still had to get up day after day after day and engage. And so he would never have been considered a hero at all if he did anything other than what you just talked about a minute ago.
Yes. And this is so strong in my mind. Hear me out so I can think through it with you. If someone has spent decades living from one story, who are they when that story no longer defines them? I mean, do we ever grieve the identity we're leaving behind, even when it wasn't serving us? Or do you think we're actually afraid of change? Or do we fear we won't recognize ourselves on the other side?
I think you know the answer to that because you asked that question so perfectly. But I will say this, going back to the experience I talked to you about before,
Yeah.
Although I physically recovered after about 6 months. For a full year afterwards, after that recovery, I was in intense emotional distress. I live, as we mentioned earlier, in New York City. I live near Central Park. And part of what I have loved to do since the pandemic started was just go on walks through random parts of New York City, Central Park or random streets or wherever. And Central Park was my favorite place during this period to walk. And I would walk at night where it was quiet and peaceful. And every night when I would go to that walk, I would burst into tears. And I would find a bench, I remember, and sit and just cry and cry and cry because I was grieving the person that was gone,
Yeah.
would never be back. That person, he had served me for a long time. He was dead. You're absolutely right. It's wrong and unfair and unreasonable not to grieve. And it's not wrong or unfair or unreasonable to be afraid of what you're going to become. What's dangerous is when you don't see that fear for what it is. The ring of fire for you to jump through so that you can ultimately emerge as that being that passed the test and connects with what's beyond the flame.
I do want to make this point, and it's something I always try to bring out, and it just seems like it gets just skirted to the side. But when we hear an incredible story or conversation that affects us, it impacts us, it makes us think, and then Monday morning arrives, life gets hard again, the old stories show up, old behaviors. How do people begin living from a new story instead of slipping back into the old ones? Because that's what can happen is people say, okay, Monday, I'm going to start doing this differently. And Monday gets here and they don't. And, or they've made progress, right? They've made some progress with whatever they're changing to serve them better, but they don't stay there.
Yeah.
They go back to where they were. So maintenance, sustaining your change can be an ever evolving thing.
That's the value of coaching, by the way, because that's exactly what paying money to, right? So you are sacrificing something for your change, as well as setting up a regular recurring meeting with someone who's going to, if they're any good, hold you accountable. Now, I have a client who first saw me a little over 6 years ago, and he runs an antique business here in New York City. And he was not happy where he was at financially or business-wise. He was doing okay.
Yeah.
But he was not where he needed to be. And he decided he was going to do something about it. And so he decided to, after meeting me at a networking meeting, hire me as his coach. And we tried it for 3 months initially to see what would happen. And one of the things that was immediately apparent about him, and that he later told me he realized was something that he really needed, was that someone that he could come back to every week so that he would feel, okay, I didn't do this. Now I have to tell this person that I didn't do this, right? He wanted the outside perspective. He wanted the bouncing back of ideas. He wanted structure and advice and all of that. But really, he also wanted someone to hold him accountable regularly. 6 years later, his income has, I want to say, gone up probably 20-fold.
Wow.
He owns a second gallery. He's written a book. He has a successful YouTube channel. He is a speaker. Right. I don't know if I mentioned, he bought another house. Right. He used the coaching system in order to be able to do exactly what you're talking about, make the decisions day to day. He's the owner of this business. He wouldn't call himself the CEO. One of the first mindset shift was to get him to call himself a CEO. And in his public testimonial for me, he says this, I'm a CEO now. Imagine this. Me, a CEO. But he didn't want to do that. remember telling him, you are a CEO. Act like it. Start calling yourself that. That makes me sound like I'm somebody important. Well, you are.
You
Right?
are.
And he has over time, right, changed that story by practicing it over and over and over again.
Mm.
Now he'll say, oh, look, I'm the CEO of this company. I want blah, blah, blah. That's change. That's exhibiting the hero story. This man, in the 6 years that we have been together, has never once missed a week. He is the only client that I meet when I am on vacation because I know he will not miss it. The only times we've missed have been when I've been sick, like when I was in the hospital and I couldn't do that. But he still, the second I was back, he was ready to go and meet again. So again, going as to what you're talking about, taking those steps and being realistic. None of us can do it alone.
No.
We've all got to have accountability and help.
Yes, I love that because transformation rarely happens in one breakthrough. Sometimes someone helps us understand the story. Sometimes someone helps us rewrite it. And sometimes we simply need someone walking beside us while we practice living it differently until the new story becomes like our norm.
Totally. And spouses can be great. I will say my spouse loves to point out the areas in which I have not met my commitment. That's one of his hobbies. But not everyone is like that. And sometimes even spouses, even mine, especially him, right, can be blinded by their love for you. They might not be objective, or they may buy into the narrative that you're saying yourself. So having someone, whether it's a coach or whether it's a colleague or whether it's someone in a mastermind group or part of a peer networking group or something like that, who's going to call you on your BS, for lack of a better word, and say, but you said, and not relent, right? It goes exactly as to what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. If someone listening realizes today, well, I've been living someone else's story, what's a concrete action they can take before tomorrow morning?
They can scroll back through this podcast and they can listen again to the description of the 5 toxic myths, the tragic origin, the ritual, the underworld, the doomsday, and the social myth, and say, do any of these apply to me? Or do any of these resonate with the story that I'm telling myself? If so, they just write down on a piece of paper this narrative that they're telling themselves. Is these words, this narrative I've been saying, they repeat what it is the XYZ myth, the ritual myth, the social myth, whatever. It is toxic. Once they've written it down, they grab that piece of paper.
Tear it up.
You know what I'm going, right? You rip it to shreds. And then you say, this is one action step that I'm going to take that is contrary to that story that I'm telling myself. So if your story is that you don't believe that you can be a CEO because that was always fancy people who weren't you, a tiny little action step that's contrary to that could be simply pulling up your LinkedIn profile and typing in the letters CEO.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it is.
And then
it is.
Right. And even that little tiny step does something.
If you guys do that, if you apply that today, you can see what freedom actually feels like for someone who's finally living their own story.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Scott, thank you. One thing I love about your work is that it reminds us our past doesn't have to become our identity. We can choose a different story, y'all. And sometimes that new story begins with a small pause. Before we wrap up, tell everyone where they can connect with you, about the podcast, follow your work.
Thank you.
And learn more about the Mythology.
First of all, they can play this podcast recording over and over again just so they can hear you say that. Right? Really, what else is there to say? But if for whatever reason that pronunciation of it isn't enough for you, go to myfreedomrocks.com. That's myfreedomrocks.com. And there you can go to whatever platform is most convenient or most impactful for you and find out more about naming your toxic myths, writing a hero story, and taking action, as well as the role of Greek myth in terms of your ability to transform, move beyond where you're at, and begin to become a leader or a presence in this world that is truly worthy of Mount Olympus.
Yes. I hope you'll connect with Scott through the links that I'll put in the show notes, so don't be looking for a pen to write everything down. And if you'd like these conversations to continue beyond the podcast, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my weekly Behind the Mic newsletter. And that's where I share reflections, practical takeaways, and behind the scene moments inspired by each episode and especially by each guest. You can subscribe at newsletter.delaythebinge.com. And if you're enjoying Delay the Binge, please take a moment to follow the podcast and leave a review. It helps more people discover these conversations and allows us to continue bringing meaningful guests like Scott and practical tools to those who need them most. Remember, you don't have to fix everything today, and you don't have to know the whole road. You only have to pause long enough to ask, what's the next right thing for me today? Until next time, pause, choose, build momentum, finish stronger, and thank you, Scott, so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll see y'all next week. Hey, it's me, Pam. And before we go, just a quick reminder. Everything we share here is meant to encourage, educate, and get you thinking. But it's not a substitute for professional mental health, medical, legal, financial, or any other licensed advice. I'm simply someone who's walking through life, learning right alongside you. And I'm grateful we get to learn together. Always seek the guidance of a qualified professional for your unique situation. Thanks for spending this time with us. Until next time, remember, sometimes the biggest change begins with one small pause. I'll see you on the next episode of Delay the Binge.